Let's start our fun-filled episode of Leaptalk. I would also like to invite today's speaker. Well, everyone knows, but I would like to introduce him in my own version. Hey, since he's made a visible impact towards me, towards Leapfrog, and everyone, I'm sure, by playing a role of a hero, designing a poster for the movie, or making us drool with his food photos on Slack. I'm sure everyone admits to that too. He has done it all and made us all amazed. So, Swapnil Acharya, welcome. In this Leap Talk, we will discuss the importance of making digital products accessible. We will talk about why it is important that websites and apps are inclusive and cater to the broad range of audiences with visual or physical impairments or disabilities. Designers, front-enders, and developers are alike play a vital role in shipping accessible products, and we will look at ways how we can ensure we're building software for the greater good. So before I hand over this session to Swapnil, reminder to please put your mics on mute and also write the questions on chat so that Swapnil can answer at the end. We've done this so many times. I'm sure like we can nail this, right? And also towards the endish of the session, we'll be sending you out the feedback form, which Leapfrog is loving. जहाँ पनि feedback form आउन थालेको छ आजकल त. So with all of that, I would just like Swapnil to take over. Swapnil?
All right, thank you so much, Pranjali. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for coming to this Leap Talk. I've personally not done a Leap Talk in about more than a year now, so it's really glad to come back. So we've done various webinars, but this is different because this is like homecoming for me as well. So today, I want to discuss something that is very important. A lot of Project Ma, we've used this unknowingly or knowingly, but we still at Leapfrog don't have a standard practice of making sure that accessibility is something that we address to in every project that we do. Because a lot of the projects that we've done goes out into the market, into the wild actually, where we have customers of all kinds. There are people who are kind of professionals, amateurs, who are daily life people who use our products. So this is something that I feel that personally we really need to amp up our game of making sure all of our software, all of our products, all of our websites that we design and develop here at Leapfrog are accessible, and they conform to the standards laid out by certain accessibility kind of governing bodies. So today I'm just going to give you a very basic overview of what really accessibility is and how we can use this in our software that we build. And this is useful for all designers, developers, and front-enders so that we all understand and we make sure that we implement this in our projects that we do. So first of all, let's look at this example of a form where we have notified the user about the success or the invalid state of a form based on the colors. So what's basically happening is when the user enters information, anything that is valid turns green and whatever is invalid turns red. Now imagine the user that you have developed the system to suffers from a color blindness. Now, unfortunately, if that user is not able to see both the green and red colors differently, what they're going to see is they're going to see a similar kind of a deep brown color. So they won't be able to make out what actually is going on or what the intended style of the form is. Okay, so the next example is how you could improve this. Like, let's say, for example, let's forget about improving it. Let's say we add an icon, right? So we add a check icon and a cross icon. Again, this is kind of rendering as the same colors into that person's perception because that person cannot tell the difference between these colors. So the best way to improve this form is to provide a valid message that says that gives them a clear idea of what's happening or what they're required to do or what the problem was, right? Now, another example I'll give you is this. I mean, you must be wondering what this is. So this is basically a lady using her laptop in the besides a pool. She has this wonderful coffee and salad, and she's reading up to write an email to her boss that she's chilling and she's not going to make it to work today. So imagine she is not colorblind. She is not disabled. She's a perfectly normal person. And now she is trying to write this email. Now the problem is her laptop has too much of glare and she cannot really read what's written there. Now everything that is very lightly put in light gray colors will not show up in her screen because there's just too much of sunshine. Now she cannot read this. Now this is a very possible scenario where we are not just considering somebody who we consider disabled, but also a person without any disabilities or impediments having this kind of troubles. Okay, so how would you really improve a screen that looks like this is by having clear color coded and dark contrast. Now what this UI is basically doing is it's using dark black colors for the text and really deep blue for the link. So it's very easy to see the colors without any distractions so that it kind of appears properly in your screen and you're able to read it. Now, there could be third cases of user where they suffer from a condition of epilepsy. Now, some particular patients of epilepsy are kind of triggered by too much of flashing content, flashing lights, strobe lights, or even UIs that have a lot of blinking and like they have this too much of movement. Those kind of patients can trigger their illness and they might have some seizures or things like that. So these are three very different situations that could happen when a user is using our system. So how do we make sure that whatever information that we're designing works for all people, works for people who have color blindness, people who are just trying to chill out at the pool, or somebody with an epilepsy, is to make sure that we address the issues of accessibility in our design. So what does basically accessibility mean? It's basically the ability to access some information. So it could be anybody, it could be just you and me, it could be anyone who needs to access certain information in our system. Those are the people who need accessibility. Now there's this uh, study from World Health Organization that say that more than 15% of the world population has some kind of impairment or disability. I mean, I am kind of repulsive to loud sound, so I kind of am not very comfortable going into real places where the music is blaring. So that could be one of my impairment. I mean, everybody of us might have some kind of disability or impairment, this or that. So it all depends. And it's not just like I'm not saying we must definitely think we have a certain image of a disabled person, but disability comes in many different forms. And it could be a lot of things that we think that it's not disability, but it's actually accounted for as disability by the World Health Organization. I mean, these are a mixture of psychological and physical impairments where a user might have one of these. So motor impairment, meaning they are unable to move their legs or hands. Hard of hearing is if they have issues with the ears. Blindness, mental health conditions, acquired physical injury. Somebody had a motorbike crash and they like lost two of their fingers. It could be autism, ADHD, they're born with it. Cognitive impairment, they cannot understand the information that they're being shown. Intellectual disability is they have lower IQ, or somebody who has a brain injury and their system does not perform functionally. So when we say disabled, this is the kind of general image that a lot of people have in their mind. Unfortunately, this is a small part of the entire population of people with impairments or disability who we consider disabled, right? So what is disability? Is basically disability is not just somebody who has a certain condition, but it is actually a condition created by the designers when the user are unable to fulfill their needs. So anybody, if your system is unable to let users do something on your system, you make the user disabled. So there are two very general terms that it's used. A lot of people use it interchangeably, but it's kind of, there's a difference between impairment and disability. So impairment is somebody something, it's a condition that you are unable to perform a certain task. Like the earlier examples of the kind of impairments people might have, you could be born with it or you acquire it. So those are impairments. But disability basically means an obstacle that your body cannot solve. So imagine this person is trying to grab those wafers up there, but they're unable to because the shelf is too high. Now, this is a condition that is making the user unable to fulfill their desire. They actually want to have that wafer, but they are not being able to. So that is the difference, broad difference that there is between impairment and disability. So here's this little video. Let's watch this. So let me know if you don't hear the sound.
When I hear Jean's voice every morning, it never ceases to make me smile. She is growing up in a world that gives her messages that blindness is not a good thing or blind people are limited in some way. I thought to myself, this is such a big undertaking, bringing this child into the world, and technology has solved so many of my problems. The first thing I did was go to technology. I went to Facebook, and I had at that time a blind friend who was a mother, and I just started talking to her about strategies for adaptive parenting. I met other blind moms literally from all around the world, but that still didn't make me feel like I had a group close to me that would be able to support and nurture and hold my family as we went through this process. What did the gingerbread man say?
You can't catch me.
I'm the
Gingerbread man.
I'm the gingerbread man. No one can raise a child alone. So I created a group on Facebook called Jean's Village. My daughter's name is Jean, and I added people to that group who I wanted to invite into our village. I started posting things about my pregnancy. It also developed into a group that I think helped me break down stigma about blindness and about blind people and about disability and the perception of limitations. I ride bar every day. It's the time when I update Facebook. I have a lot of different technologies, a braille display that connects to my smartphone, a smartphone that has a screen reader built into it.
Audience. Location. Album. Text field is editing.
It's remarkable that this powerful platform is available to almost anyone in the world for free. Every day I use Facebook to break down stigma. It's an equalizer because I'm not such an anomaly. I'm just a blind mom.
So Tim Berners-Lee, he was the founder of the internet. He said that the power of web is in its universality. Access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect. So the founder of the internet agrees to the fact that internet should be available in the same level for everybody, right? So why do we really need to make a site or a system accessible? Why do we need to do it? It's because you are helping out your users. You're making sure that users are able to use your system properly. So anybody with blindness or low vision, deafness or hearing loss, limited movements, speech disabilities, photosensitivity, learning disabilities, or users with technological impediments are able to access your information the same way every other user is intended to. So that's why you actually need to make your system accessible. And why do we do it? Is because systems built ground up with accessibility in mind is the right thing to do. It's basically a good thing, a good practice to do, because you are actually building something that is useful and accessible to everyone. It reduces the complexities, and now your content is structured in such a way that it's easier for you to manage and scale your content. And there is the modularity of the structure that will actually help you make it easier for people to your developers to maintain your system and scale up the system in the same way. And above all, in many countries, it's the law. So they'll have to do it. If your system, especially the government services, are not accessible, they will not get a grant, like a go from the authorities. So they'll have to make it accessible. So that's why it's very important, and especially we in Nepal may not be using it much. A lot of our companies that are operating in Nepal may not be doing it, but a lot of the other companies in the world do it. and they really need to do it. There's no other way around. So we actually help users in form of sight, sound, and senses to make sure that they can access our information. Now, going back to the color blindness issue, so there was this real problem we had with a project in Leapfrog. Delphi, when it actually was launched, and when the scientists and Nurex started using this system, one of the feedbacks or the issue that was raised is because some of the scientists there were unable to perceive all the colors. Now, to those who don't know about Delphi, Delphi has a lot of charts and a lot of controls and a lot of color-coded information that is very important to be accessed by the user, but to understand the status or the stage of the particular thing that they're looking at. So Mark Fortner came back to Neeraj, who had to create a plan to make this system scalable in a way that it addresses all the color blindness issue. So I was speaking to Neeraj the other day, and what he said is basically we created a bunch of color contrast tests to make sure that the system is accessible to all. And they also Neeraj developed a color spectrum that now all the colors that are used in the Nurex project, Delphi project, are within this range that you see in the screen. So this was done to make sure that whatever colors we do are perceived properly, or at least closer to how we intended to be, by all users suffering various kinds of color blindness. So as a result, the Delphi project has actually now got this wonderful consistency in their project that helps users of all kinds to access the information correctly without kind of them missing out on important information that they really need to see. Now imagine a pie chart which has different colors that they all look the same. Now they don't, because now we're using this spectrum. It helps their users to correctly understand what's going on in the screen. Now, this was one of the color blindness issue. The other issue you could really have is how people with blindness or vision impairment are unable to read the information. So they listen to your website. A lot of almost all, like you watched in the video earlier, that lady was listening to Facebook. So if you don't structure your information in a way that it's easier for the screen readers to read, the screen readers is not being going to be able to read your information. So as a result, we have various conventions, and we have ARIA, which we use to identify the content in a certain way so that the screen reader processes the information correctly, and the person with vision impairment is able to correctly process that information and understand that information, right? So how do we know that we've made an accessible website? How do we make sure that our software is accessible? Is basically we're following some guidelines out there. So there is this thing called WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guideline, that kind of gives you kind of a standard like things that you need to do in order to make your system compliant. And there are 3 levels of compliance: A, AA, and AAA, which I'll come back to in a bit later. And they also gives recommendations and guidelines on how this system could be further improved. There are a lot of Chrome extensions or like your browser extensions that let you test your system using these various kind of simulations of color blindness, contrast test, and things as such. And there are also other online accessibility checkers that are available out there that you can use. Right. So why AA is important is because AA is kind of the levels of how much compliant does your system need to be. The bigger, the better. The more number of A's you have, the better it is. But there are certain things, that bare minimum that you need to do, which is defined by the essential like conformance, where you have to at least provide the most basic like accessibility standards. And then AA is higher, which is required by the EU government now. Now, any websites made for or in the UA need to be not just A, but AA. And there's this third level, which is for very specialized use. Like, for example, something that is built for the people with disability, they really need to have the AAA conformance. So once they do this, the system is considered compliant, and it's good for use by everybody. Now, who needs to make sure that this accessibility compliant issues are handled? It's not just UI and UX designers, because it starts there, but even the front enders, the QA engineers, the product managers, and the project managers equally need to be in the same loop so that we all understand and account for accessibility in our project, and to make sure we do a kind of, before we sign off, we do a checklist of things and make sure our system is compliant. So this is something that we really can do and need to do in order to make our system accessible to all. So, but this might sound like a lot of work, right? So because you really need to have one whole process where you make sure that everything is accessible or not, everything is compliant or not, and this could be a hassle. But there's a very easy way to fix it. Just let's design in such a way that it actually becomes inclusive to everyone. If you design it with everybody in mind, it's naturally going to work for everyone. भनेको चाहिँ ठ्याक्कै, like, not just for the reason of making a conformance, but if you build something ground up with accessibility in mind, you will probably not have last minute issues trying to make sure things are accessible or not. So what we really are trying to push for is even start at the starting point of design, right? From when we start with the style guide and the UI design, we actually start using colors and the contrast scale so that it actually matches and conforms to all the requirements. And when we're writing our HTML, or when we're writing our code, front-end code, we make sure that we have all the controls in place so that it actually becomes like accessible. Once we do that, we don't need to worry about whether our system is छ कि छैन भने चाहिँ worry गरेर राख्नु परेन. So couple of things that we need to understand before in order to make our system compliant. Now there are certain principles that kind of guide this whole process. I'm going to go through each one of these. The first one is the perception. So whether the information that you are providing is perceivable or by the user, or whether they are able to make something out of it or not. So here is Facebook. So this is a Facebook profile picture I updated a couple of days ago. Now what Facebook does is Facebook has this wonderful system that helps them analyze what's going on in the image. So if you see that alt tag has been automatically generated by Facebook, where it says image may contain Swapnil Acharya standing a suit. Now the good thing is, if somebody who's not able to see Facebook, when they have the screen readers reading it, they will basically read out the alt image text. That in that way they know that, okay, Swapnil is wearing a suit in that image without actually seeing it. So it's imperative that all our images and graphics have descriptive alternate text. Like for example, a lot of times I've seen that we don't use descriptive text. Like for example, we put an image and we just say alt image. That's a very wrong way to do. So the right way to do is alt we actually have a description of what that image is. Like for example, Swapnil looking at the ocean, or Swapnil wearing a suit, it should be descriptive, the alternate text. The second one is allowing closed caption to transcripts of the audio and video. Like there's a good chance that in YouTube or other streaming sites, you've seen that even they have that things like people laughing, music playing, right? Birds chattering. Why do they do that? They do that is because they're providing a closed caption, a CC of the text, so that people who cannot really see the video can still listen, who kind of they can actually have a closed captioning, so that it helps them to like I'm sorry, not blind, deaf people who cannot hear the sound can still look at the image and understand what's going on. Now that is a different use case. I mean, this could also be used at times when you are in a bunch of people, with a bunch of people, and you cannot play sound, so you can still look at the video and understand what's going on. The third concept is creating a logical content hierarchy and semantic markup description. So if we group our content in this hierarchy, it really helps all the screen readers on different types of systems to kind of process our like code correctly, so that they can really jump between navigation, and they can like have this descriptive IDs of each of these controls that we're presenting them, so the screen readers are correctly able to process the things that we have in the UI. The third thing is allowing sufficient text contrast. And we can do this by, of course, the AA testing has that. So if you see here, like colors beyond this gray are kind of failed because there's just too little contrast with the background color, which is white. So what we do is we generally use colors in this range that actually stands out, pops out, and has a good contrast. So even if somebody inverts the colors, because some people actually are like repulsive to like white light, so they kind of darken the screen. So if they do that, they can still be able to clearly read the text if we have a certain color contrast. The other one is allowing users to control the content of the page. Like, for example, it's not just about responsive, but a lot of users cannot really read small letters, especially with old people who have poor eyesight. They actually zoom in the content a lot more in order to read that text. So what our system should be able to do is we should allow users to control the content of the page, the size of the content, without actually breaking. Like, you see this wide, for example, even I've like zoomed in 400 times, but still the content stays intact and I can still read it like I'm reading a novel. So if you see, this is being optimized for different scales of viewing. So it's very important that we do that. Like, if you start zooming in, the content starts breaking up and like starts going all over the place. The content should actually still be blocky, and it should be in place so that people are able to read it. And the other example is allowing user to control motion and transition. Wait, okay, so this slide is this. Okay. So the second point is operability. So what you show on screen should be operable also. Let's say, for example, users need to have control of the media that they're being presented with. If you see this example of a 9 gag screen where a video is supposed to play, see, they clearly have three controls there to control the media. The first one is the play button. So your video does not play without the user implicitly pressing the play button. Then you have the ability to mute the audio or play the audio, and then you have the option to go to full screen. So what we're basically doing is we're giving the users control over the media that we present to them. By following this practice, we can make sure that the user can access this media when they want and how they want it. The other thing is actionability of the UI component. So whatever we put in the screen should have an action. Now there could be two kinds of action. One action is the user needs to click something, press something in order to get to a different point, or they should be able to process that information and learn that information. Like, say, for example, this is a MailChimp dashboard. Now, what a user can do is they can click these buttons. What I know is as soon as I see it, I know where I can click, where I cannot click. This information is a पढ्नको लागि हो, यो चाहिँ क्लिक गर्नको लागि हो, यो चाहिँ यहाँ क्लिक गरे भने कतै पुगिन्छ भने it's clearly giving a user a way for them to know that what they need to do in order to like access or process the information, consume the information. So it should be very apparent for the users that they need to know when they're looking at what is actionable and what's not actionable. And we should also try to reduce the amount of non-actionable content in our page so that whatever information we present is meaningful to the user. Then the other one is allowing keyboard access. Like, a lot of you must have already had this problem where if your mouse doesn't work or a trackpad doesn't work, now you need a workaround to get something done. So you end up using keyboard, or some people are very used to using keyboards. So there should be a clear hierarchy of the content by where if the user wants to access any of the information on our website or system using the keyboard, they should be able to do it. So there should be clear tab index, a clear arrow. The arrow should be able to work properly so that the user can get from one part to another. So even if I don't have a trackpad or a mouse, I can still get things done. The other one is kind of letting users skip between the header and the content, because a lot of the times a user may not be able to scroll, or they may not have the information that they need readily available. So when you kind of remove all the style sheet, I mean, you don't use a style sheet, your application basically becomes a long streak of text, and the menus could be really long. So in order for the user to get to the content or get back to the navigation, we should provide clear way for them to skip to content. So this is not front-enders who write the CSS have done before, but it doesn't really show up in the UI itself. But when we open this New York Times website on a screen reader, it will have a way for the users to toggle between the content and the navigation. That actually allows users to go back and forth between the content and if they want to get to another page. The other very important thing is to provide meaningful form labels and buttons. So when you have an input button or when you have an input field, it should clearly be labeled on what it is and what is expected out of the user. Like you see in this example, never say submit, because submit doesn't really give user the context of what they're doing. So we use create my account so that the user clearly understands like what that button is supposed to do. Also make it very descriptive of what we're looking for, because the user would never know that they need to enter their address or phone number by just saying ID. So we should be able to clearly say that, okay, we also accept email address and phone number as your user ID. So we really need to make sure that our forms are meaningful so that the users can look at and understand. They should be able to know what they're supposed to do. The other concept is understanding what is shown to the user. There could be a lot of times where there could be a certain gap in information or technology that users may not be able to understand what they're looking at. Like say, for example, a lot of the typical errors in software have very technical language that a user does not understand. Like so what's happening in that remote desktop connection example is we are basically telling users a bunch of jargon that they don't understand. So what we need to make sure is we should be able to create a system that makes it easier for users to understand what they're seeing, both in terms of what's written, I mean using plain English, and interaction, what they need to do. While okay थिचेपछि के हुन्छ भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ the user should clearly be able to understand. So if you look at the example on the right side, you'll see that how you could tackle a situation like this by using clear, concise, and useful error messages so that the users understand what's going on and what they need to do next. The other example is following a logical order of the content. So when we're writing the HTML, it's very important that we follow that hierarchy of content so that it starts with the page heading and then section heading and child heading, so that the information is laid out in such a way that it's easier for users and browsers to process. And the other part is we need to do is make sure we provide clear role of what is intended out of that HTML component in our code. So let's say we have a banner, we have a navigation, we have the mains area, and then we have a side area, and then inside the main area we have a form area. So all these things really need to be clearly ordered so that it's easier for processing of the content. And another part is error handling. So when we are telling users that an error has happened, it's very important for the users to understand that where exactly the error has occurred and what they really need to do. Like say, for example, here, there is a main alert message on top that says, hey, look, there's been an error. And then when they scroll down, they see what actual errors have happened. So you see a lot of websites might also have this error messages bundled together. Now the problem is the user will not be able to map which field has that error occurred. So if we do this and provide the error messages right next to the control, they will be able to take action, and they'll be able to perceive that, okay, this is where the error has happened and this is what I need to fix. So we need to handle the errors in that way. And the other concept is the robustness of the software or the app that we've made. Now, there's something called responsive. I'm sure everybody has already worked on a responsive website once in their lifetime. So it's actually making a way of it's a technique of making sure that our system works on all device sizes and user agents. So now if somebody is trying to open our app in a mobile, it doesn't break, and the content that we present is clearly readily available, and they are really able to get all the information they need without the page going off the browser viewport to a size or kind of breaking into several chunks or things like that happening. So we need to make sure that our content is working perfectly across all devices. That's one of the very simple basic ideas. And the other idea is keeping our the whole system simple. Like we were having this discussion earlier on when we were working on the Insightful Games project last month, that we really wanted to have only 3 levels of interaction. So there is this main section where user sees a bunch of games. In the second level, they see the details of the games. And in the third level, they see the content of the games. So the whole application is just 3 layers deep. So why we're doing is making it easier for users to switch back and forth between the levels and not being confused or not getting lost in the whole system, because it should be users to get back to the where they came from, and making sure that they don't really go down a rabbit hole that it becomes very difficult for them to know which in which section of the whole application they are. So we try to keep it very simple. The whole structure of the application should not go lower than 3 levels. So a very nice example that I recently found was the app TikTok. Though I don't make any TikTok videos, I kind of ended up watching a couple of the videos that are out there. And what I see is they basically just have the watch and comment and the profile. That's it. They're just 3 levels deep, which is really easy for users to know in which section of the app they are. The other option is allowing the system to be compatible with older devices and low bandwidth conditions. Like Facebook, when you open Facebook on a modern mobile browser, it gives you that a more enhanced view that you see on the right hand side. But if you open Facebook on an older phone, it kind of has a very basic HTML view, which you see on the right. The reason they do this is to make sure that their devices work on low bandwidth conditions. There's very little JavaScript there. It works entirely just HTML and CSS. That's it. The pages load very fast in older devices and places where the internet may not be as fast as other places. So we really need to make sure that our system in many ways is compatible. We may not be able to do it right away, but the thing is, if we keep our content structure simpler and the level of kind of the navigation simpler, I mean, we can achieve this as well. I don't necessarily mean that it needs to be HTML and CSS only, but even we should take every measures to make sure that our system is lightweight. Okay, now where are we right now? So so like, are we really doing the accessibility things? How important is it to do? Because I said earlier that this is a law in many other countries in the world. Is it a law in Nepal? Yes, it is a law in Nepal. So there is this apangata bhaka व्यक्तिको अधिकार सम्बन्धी end, which actually clearly indicates that the सूचना र सञ्चारका उपकरण, the प्रविधि जुन हामीले बनाउँछौँ, the one that we make should be compliant and it should be accessible to people with disabilities and impairments. It clearly lays out. So it's also a law in Nepal. It's already been apps in Nepal may not have implemented this yet, but it is necessary to do it, and we could be this ones going to start. Now यो त भयो like the whole Nepalको lawको कुरा, but where are we on leapfrog? So leapfrogमा we kind of make sure that we have the bare minimum done, and most of the projects that we are doing right now actually have some level of conformance, but then we are not there yet. So we've still done some work but not all work. So our plan is by 2021 we want to get to at least a double A status, where we are able to say that our applications are compliant with most of the accessibility case. So what we're trying to do is going on forward. So this is also something that you'll see in our next quarterly all hands, where we will be talking about laying out a plan for creating an accessible roadmap for coming months and coming quarters in Leapfrog. Okay, so how can we get to know more information about accessibility? Is there's this A11Y checklist, which is one of the most sought for and the go-to accessibility checklist, which you can try. There are also some Chrome extensions available. I use a lot of these, like the wave evaluation tool or the Dalton extension for color blindness. And there are a lot of these, and there are also some on like site-wide, like Site Improve Checker, where you just enter the URL and it gives you a report. So we kind of have been doing this, and now my plan is to amp this up and we do more of this so that we kind of make sure our systems are very much compliant in terms of accessibility. And there is this another quote. I want to end with another quote by the Center of Universal Design, where they say that the universal design is the design of products and environments usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without the need for adaptation or specialized design. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to create a different system for people with impairment and disability, but we want to use whatever is available so that it works for everybody, and so that there is no clear, we don't have that differentiation, and we make sure that every user, irrespective of how they are, where they come from, are able to use our system correctly. So thank you so much for listening. So let's go for question and answer. So if you have questions, you can directly unmute and ask them, or you can also like write them into the chat and we'll try to answer that. Pranjali?
Swapnil, I have a quick question.
Okay.
So you told us like we are in A standard right now, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Was there anything that was hindering our progress in terms of getting along
We
with AAA standard?
No, actually, these are not like these are recommendations. This is not a scale, so they don't really measure in terms of scale. Key AA1 minimum, we need to at least have the basic structure. So the reason why we've not done that is because of other priorities. This has not really been a priority to a lot of the projects, and we've only actually went out there and started fixing problems when a problem occurs. Like in Delphi, we kind of did not consider that, but later when it actually became a problem, we went out to solve that. So our plan say not just wait for the problem to occur, but to make sure that we are already compliant of the standard before we do it.
Okay, thank you then.
Okay. So Anup has a question on how to persuade the clients of this value. So basically we need to educate them. Now my idea is also when we're sending out estimations, we have certain story points dedicated to accessibility so that the client know that this is something that we will do. So it's just like QA and just like design verification, there's going to be one place, one phase in the project where we will do the accessibility check, and that way it becomes a part of the overall project delivery. So it's not something that they can choose from. It's not a topping, but it's actually part of the core system is how we want to place it. Now, in order to make them understand the value, we need to tell them that the virtues. Of course, we need to be the advocates, and we need to tell them, okay, what happens if we don't have that accessibility, if our system is not compliant. So once we tell them the downsides, I'm sure they would be persuaded to do that, and let's hope they do that. And also when we attach this as a part of the project estimation, it becomes easier for us to accommodate certain time to make sure that it happens without fail. Right. I hope I answered that well.
Hello, Swapnil.
Yes, Sabu.
Yeah, so I have a question as well. So usually what I struggle about is for the disabled states. Usually for disabled states, what we tend to do is we tend to use a slight lighter version of the grays for like buttons and the checkbox and tabs and etc. So, and it fails the 4.5 ratio that we talked about, the AA. So if we do not do it slightly the lighter gray, then it tends to look like it's not disable. And if we do the slightly lighter version of gray, then it fails the standards. So I think that's something that I struggle with always.
Okay. Yeah. So what's been recommended? I was going through the accessibility guide by the government of UK, and what they say is don't disable the content, enable the content, but if something is not applicable, tell the user that this is not applicable. Tell the users that if they click the button of so what they basically want to do is they want to get rid of the whole disabled state to make the disabled state not exist at all. But when a user has not filled out a form like camera, generally what we do is we have some input boxes and we have a button. So until the user does not enter information in the input boxes, we don't enable the button. Or it could be other users where the user may not be able to click the button yet. So what they say is keep the button enabled, but once they click, tell the users key your name and password is missing. So by doing that, the users will clearly be able to perceive that it's a result of the action that they took. And it's not something that the system, and there will be no confusion in the user's part to know if something is disabled or not. So that way, what they say, but generally it's very hard thing to completely get rid of disabled states altogether. So in that way, one way to do that is to have some additional text that saying that why it's disabled or why the user are not able to use. So generally they like recommend to have a descriptive text telling why certain thing is disabled by keeping these AA 4.5 ratio still intact. So more words, I guess that's the solution that's been recommended for that. Okay, awesome. Do we have any more questions? So can somebody let me know if the kinds of this, like the accessibility practices that we've done in our project. So Delphi is definitely one I know. So we've done some of it in Laudio is what I believe. So are there any other projects where we have made sure, where we had a condition where we have to like need to make the system accessible? And it doesn't need to be like disabled people is what we have understood from today's lesson. It needs to be accessible for everybody, because we really want to put the users to be in the front seat and they control the content. So it should be compliant to everybody. Okay, so Saroj definitely has a very good point of making the darker contrast for Leapfrog brand. Yes, definitely our, the bad news here is the Leapfrog green actually failed our accessibility test because it did not have enough contrast with the background color white. So that's something that I see that we need to improve in coming days. And also the gray that we use for Leapfrog logo itself, because this logo was made like 4 years ago, and me myself, I was not aware of all these compliance issues, but now we do. I think it's a good time for us to take this matter forward and make sure our brand has enough contrast so that it passes. Because I was very horrified last time when we ran this check on the one of the compliance tests, and our Leapfrog logo's green was rejected, saying it's too low contrast. Yeah, I know, Saroj. So let's try to improve that.
I think we, Swapnil, the other industry project that we've done had to do a lot of accessibility was in the education sector for the Career Key platform, I think.
Right.
Because there was a lot of students involved.
So,
I also have a question. Swapnil.
yeah, go on.
So, तपाईँले भन्नुभयो कि it's not something that's gonna instantaneously happen. It's something we build on. बिस्तारै पनि. You make a certain level and then you work on it. Where do you think we should fit the concept of accessibility in our running projects?
Kritik, I don't know if it's your internet or mine. I didn't get it.
Am I audible?
You are, but you broke up.
Okay, so let me repeat myself. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, you know. You make something and then you make it more accessible. So where exactly do we put it in our day-to-day work? Now that we are aware, should we think about this way early on in the estimations to make space for it, or is it something that we finish a certain milestones, achieve something, and then take it on as an enhancement? What's your recommendation on that? How foresighted?
I think we do this when we are actually building it, and not wait for an evaluation, because that's actually an additional part of the project that we need to spend time on. So the idea is to build it ground up, so embedded into the system at the time of it's being built. So when we are first building the project starter kit or building the project like the framework, we actually have accessibility built into it. And last maybe QA ko belama, we actually do a run and test that if everything has been compliant or not. So I think that's a good way to do. Not to have a separate phase. Okay, sprint 45 ma chai gaera we'll do accessibility test गर्ने भन्ने चाहिँ हुँदैन त्यस्तो. That's something that we don't want to do. We want to start it at sprint 0 actually.
So you want us to build a practice of
yes
in our everyday. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, then we can actually end the session. What do you say, Pranjali? Okay, I think that's about it. So, oh, how do we, okay, we have a question here. So in order to test the accessibility, like I mentioned earlier, there's a couple of tools available out there. These tools are basically your Chrome extensions, or these are the website like accessibility checkers. Like for example, what you see here in screen right now. So you would, what you would do is typically when you have an app, a desktop app, you would run it in Chrome and run the tests so that it'll tell you something is accessible or not. And it'll give you recommendations on how to improve that. So, it might be a bit embarrassing to show you the rate of compliance of our existing website. The good news is we're actually getting rid of this website in a couple of weeks. But if you see my screen, there's this colorblind Dalton which I can click, and what it'll do is it'll kind of show me what it would look like to different people with different levels of like color blindness. So good thing is we're using a lot of green and blue, so this kind of does not appear too different. Oh yeah, sorry, thank you. Yeah, so it doesn't appear too different except for a couple of colors which would look very different on a with users with deuteranomaly or protanomaly or tritanomaly. So these are different conditions of color blindness. Or the other extension that I use is the wave evaluation tool, which basically tells me whether my okay, it has 9 errors. So let's see what the errors are. Yeah, it says very low contrast. Like for example, the gray that we use for okay, very low contrast one. So that this green is just too light, and it says kind of empty links. So we kind of have, I don't know why we have empty links, but some of our links are not connected, is what it says. Oh, like for example, this Facebook is not connected. So like redundant text alternatives. So it'll really give you these kind of, so it says that this image does not have a proper alt text. So it kind of gives you all these. So it's very easy for us to know what's accessible and what's, if it's not. Yeah. So bad thing is we did not do these tests when launching our website. So that now we know that we need to do it. We definitely do it in our next iterations. Well, that's all for me. If we can end this, we should now. I think we're okay. All right, so we should thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for attending. I hope this was useful. And also, let's talk on how we can make our existing applications or the ones that we build more accessible, and to make sure that it works for everybody. Thank you so much, everybody. All right, we're ending it now. Bye-bye.